I thought it would be good, since Shavuos is coming starts next Saturday night, or this Saturday night. This Saturday, that I address some issues about Shavuos and giving of Torah. But the main focus is really looking at who can study Torah. I mean, that's been a debate for some time. That's clearly been shifting away from the normative Orthodox Jewish approaches that a person who's not Jewish cannot study Torah. Now, when they say that, we have to put that in the context of what they mean. When they are thinking the Goyim, right? The people who are idol worshippers, who are involved in pagan practices, they should limit it on what they should study. But my contention from the beginning, I think you guys would agree, is how are they going to know if they don't study, right? So I'm going to make a broad statement that every human being should study something about Torah. Every human being should study something about Torah. However, today I'm going to give you some things that come from Rabbi Yehudah Amital on the study of Torah. He lived between 1925 and 2010. He was a yeshiva, Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, and he had some pretty interesting insight on the modern era in Torah. We have a lot of stuff from the sages talk about what we should do in the study of Torah. But having somebody from the modern era have and develop out a thought process of who studies Torah and why should they study is pretty interesting. And on top of that, I would like to add in that, for the benefit of those who are watching who are not Jewish, what are you to study and where do you start? I mean, I think for most people that come through this journey is where do you start in the study of Torah, right? What's the first step? So we're going to cover all of those things, God willing, and through Hashem's loving kindness, may He give us the wisdom to be able to process and understand the writings of the sages and also of Rabbi Amital. Rabbi Amital often spoke in his yeshiva and his community about the importance of studying Torah in his time. He says even the most simple to be a talmid hakham, even the most simple should attempt to study Torah. Everybody can study at some level. Everybody can be a diligent scholar and should attempt to be a diligent scholar of oral Torah. And his approach, I really thought, was very refreshing. The situation now is different from the past, in which it says, in the past, young children, Jewish children, all of them went to Jewish schools, and nowadays the vast majority of them don't go to Jewish schools. And of course, none of the non-Jewish world actually attempts to study and have the integrity of studying Torah at any level at all. I mean, as a matter of fact, the Christians claim that the Bible, their Old Testament and New Testament, that they have these together, but they really don't study either one of them very vigorously, and if they did, they would have some problems. One of the things that I have noticed about people who've come out of Christianity is that they have been people who have studied themselves out of Christianity. People that are leaving to embrace either becoming a bin or bat noach, they're not people that are trying to look for an easing out or trying to find a way to scam out on their relationship with God. They're actually people who have studied and feel absolutely obligated to attach themselves to the study of Torah. More and more coming every day. For the several reasons that Rabbi Amital post here, I find interesting. He says, first of all, people today are far more exposed to the outer world and to media than in the past. And hence the need to reinforce their fear of heaven, which is done by what? Studying Torah. People today have far more free time than in the past. Why do we have more free time? Modern conveniences. I mean, it's amazing. It's funny, the advertising making the the first washing machine used to say that just a free more time, mothers to have more free time, and they would show them doing leisurely work. And in reality, it just gave them more free time to do more work, right? It wasn't to relax and smoke a cigarette. It was to give them to more work to do. People today have far more free time, and when it is not devoted to Torah, it is spent on other things that really don't matter. Rabbi also says, in a secular environment in which we live, confrontations with the secular world constantly arises in the realms of faith, devotion, and religious practice, generally even without our awareness. Therefore, one needs to be armed with mighty intellectual weapons based on the knowledge of the Torah. Before class, Tom gave me a quote, I liked it, I'm going to use it. Tom says, Hasatan is like a crafty fisherman, like a professional fisherman. He baits the hook according to the appetite of the fish. Right? Now, if we are people who have developed an appetite for the study of Torah and the practice and understanding of the wisdom of the sages, I don't think he's going to be baiting a hook for me to take me out that way, right?
We won't be hungry.
We won't be hungry for it because we're hungry for the Torah. And look, I've said this over and over to many people in the past few years. Torah has become an elixir for the things that create craving and your desire. It helps to, fine-tune your desire. It's like developing a taste for better quality food, right? It's instead of a cheeseburger, I'd rather fix me something at home that's a lot more healthier, a salad, right? Whatever, something vegetarian, I don't know. But the whole point is our palate, our spiritual palate becomes refined. And once it becomes refined, you cannot settle for just ignorant, junk food. Yeah, exactly it. It's junk food. And look, all you have to do is go back and listen to some stuff from the past, and you'll go, it's completely empty. In a world where importance of intellect is so significant, Judaism intellect is very important. The reason why Jewish children tend to score higher is because they're encouraged to study so vigorously when they're younger. There is an obligation simply by studying something such as Daf Yomi or the daily installment of the Talmud study, which does not require significant intellectual effort. The brain and our intellectual strength is man's most important organ. We can make it do with worshiping the Lord only with our hands or with our lips, say with the shofar in hand and blowing it with our mouth. This is what he's quoting. And by laying tefillin and eating matzah, while the brain alone sets aside, it is not used for worshiping the Holy One. How does our brain worship the Holy One? By studying the Torah. Our hands can worship him. Our mouth can worship him. Our actions, our walking, our giving of charity, we can worship in our actions, but our brain is the only organ that doesn't get to worship if we don't study Torah, if we don't actually process and think. This is what's amazing and what I love about Judaism, is Judaism requires me to think, not to feel. Thinking is I could be absolutely deceived by my feelings and emotions. People do that all the time. But to think and to be able to logically lay things out is a huge blessing. Now, he even goes on to say that that women should study Torah. Doesn't that sound sort of the opposite of what we've heard in Judaism? He says that women are not obligated to study the Torah, but he brings up, well, what about the fact that they should teach it to their children? How do you teach Torah to your children if you don't know it? Right? So the whole idea is that women should also study Torah. Children and youth obviously should study Torah. Now, regarding, as he talks about, Rabbi Amital talks about regarding the need to attract the youth to study in Torah, he noted the importance of fathers setting the example for their children. The school is a marginal factor in education children must receive from the home. I asked my son-in-law when I was visiting, I see little Levi running around, and he loves his Abba. And in our society, in our school system today, there's this huge challenge to demasculinize, emasculate boys, right? To more feminize boys. And I said, are you concerned about that when he goes to school, if he happens to go to a public school? And he said, yes, very concerned about it. But I'm going to raise him in my home to understand the strength and character of being a young man, right? So it comes from home training. And this is one of the things that I constantly reinforce. The world is out and ready to devour our children. But as a parent, if you give them the right tools at home, they'll be fine. They'll be able to make it. And thank God, I wish that I could have had the ability to study Torah like I do now when my children are around. But now that my children are older, they still see my example of my love and passion to study Torah and love Hashem. And I think that most people in the B'nai Noach movement that say, well, what about my children who are married and gone and they have no interest in what I'm doing? It's immaterial. They have their own journey to take care of. You just need to focus on what you need to do and be an example. And later on, we're going to talk about this idea of being an example of the actions of Torah. Now, rather than children must not only hear their fathers or see their fathers study Torah and their mothers, but they need to see them devote their every spare moment to the study of Torah. Now look, guys, nowadays, there is no excuse why we cannot consume Torah. There's none, at all, period. We have the Torah Learning Channel, for crying out loud. We have Torah learning that is all over the internet. And the best of the best is all over the internet. The problem is you cannot develop an appetite for something you never consume. And it's not going to come from an occasional nibble. You'll not develop an appetite until you begin to consume that, and then that will be the only thing that can fill your desire. Rabbi Amital believed that women, as I said, and this is his quote, citing Maimonides, women should be obligated to study Torah. Citing Maimonides in Sefer HaMitzvot, it says, and I worship him, Deuteronomy 11:13. This means to study. He concluded, from this we may conclude that Maimonides' opinion of Torah study fulfills not only the commandment to teach them to your children, but also the commandment to worship the Lord. So the reason why in this modern day that we must study Torah, that is the one vehicle in worshiping God. Yes?
Something we're overlooking here. Recently, it's like 40 years ago, to get out of the 8th grade in Texas, you had to memorize the Travis letter.
Right.
Okay. So then, I remember when I was going to school, I had to memorize stuff. And so I heard two examples. A lady this weekend said her 10-year-old son came with his favorite scripture, reading out of the Bible, something in Psalms.
Right.
Okay. Then the next example, that all kind of ties in what you're saying. This guy was 10 years old, and he memorized the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So we can study this, but to have parents that make you
memorize it. You know what my parents did? My parents made us learn one psalm a month, and then they would reward us. You know, they'd give us, I don't know, whatever. It was, something significant, because it takes a lot to learn some psalms. They're quite long. But even to this day, I can hear 2 or 3 words of a psalm and start saying the rest of it. It's like, what a blessing. Of course, I didn't think it was a blessing at the time, okay? I didn't like it at all. But nevertheless, it was a blessing. Now, what should be studied? Now, let's first talk about, in traditional Judaism, what is encouraged for people to study. Every Jewish child learns their first study book is what? The book of Leviticus. They learn the Aleph Bet. I do think that every person who's going to be serious about their study needs to learn Hebrew, at least the Hebrew alphabet, and learn how to pronounce words and to read it. Even though you may not know what it's saying, learn how to read it. And the more you do that, it is amazing. Sherry, how long have you been studying Aleph Bet? or the Hebrew?
No, I've attempted it many times.
But no, like now.
A couple of years.
Okay, a couple of years. But isn't it fun when you're hearing a lecture and you hear someone say something in Hebrew or quote something in Hebrew and you pick out several words already you know? It's like, wow,
Just this, was it Monday when they opened the embassy?
right?
And Netanyahu was saying something at the end of his speech. He started saying Baruch atah Adonai.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it makes you feel good. So obviously, study of Torah is very important. And by the time a child's at a certain age, they begin to study the Talmud and Mishnah, et cetera, et cetera. I wouldn't encourage the average person off the street that's not Jewish to study any of those books, but to first concentrate for at least 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years, on the first 5 books of the Bible and the commentaries, the Chumash, the commentaries of Maimonides, Rashi, et cetera, et cetera. Onkelos, it's a great set of books studying over here. We use it here. Great commentary. Study it to where you know the material front and back. So if someone could sit down and you could do like a trivia challenge, you could actually, if they gave you, say, okay, in Bed Midbar, what happened here, here, and here? And you could go, oh, this was happening, and this is about all the journeys, this is how the tents are set up. You will be able to know that. Why is it important to know that part of Torah? It's because it gives us the foundation of the essence of God. It really gives us the foundation of the essence of God. It gives us His attributes of mercy and faith. It helps us to understand order. It helps us to understand that what kodeshim or holiness is, and cleanliness and purity before God. All of these things begin to give us building blocks that really become something that changes your whole outlook. Now, for the non-Jew, what are we to study? I would first say the same thing, Parashat, the commentaries surround the study of it, and then I would highly encourage the works of the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. The knowing God's plan, the way of God, the path of the just, the best books. And why? I think Sandy and most of you guys will testify that it was his books that really began to cement some very profound understanding about God, about our spirituality, about how we connect to God and how to live a righteous life. And so they're absolute books that must be in a library and opened on a regular basis and studied as many times, 100 times if you can. You need to do it. The next one, Duties of the Heart, a great series. Now, what do we say about the oral Torah? This is what is important for the non-Jewish world. Oral Torah should be studied in the context of studying the written Torah, right? The only way to really get that is you need to have a good kosher source of teaching. Now, online is a lot of good kosher sources of studying oral Torah. But you will get oral Torah just by studying the written Torah. When you go through the first 5 books of Moses, you will most definitely get a good diet of that. Let's talk about persistence. Persistence is absolutely the hallmark of good scholarship. You cannot become good at something you only do half-heartedly. You have to be persistent. Rabbi Amital encourages students to be persistent in the study of Torah. Once addressing students before they left for vacation, he expressed the reservation about seeking the dangerous challenges, saying that there was no need to look for dangerous places. He then tapped his hand on the volumes of the Talmud lying before him and said, "Whoever wants a challenge for the break, here, let him take 6 orders of Mishnah." When he described the lives of the great rabbis, he generally noted how constantly they study. And he goes to tell a story about Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who would study all the time. I mean, he was constantly engrossed in his books. Sometimes he would study for so many hours, he would put his foot in a tub of cold water to keep him awake. You know, it was like he was engrossed in his studies. Most people don't have the patient spouses and family members to be able to do that. But I would think a lot of women would love to have a spouse who loved Hashem in the study of Torah that much. It says that his mother would bring him thermos of tea and bread so that he would make sure he could stay nourished because he wouldn't eat otherwise. It says once there was a family who had suffered a tragedy and needed his intervention to prevent an autopsy from being done. The time was 2:30 a.m. and the family refrained from calling him due to the late hour. Finally, after much agitation, one of them got up, encouraged to dial the number, and not even 2 seconds had passed, Rabbi Gorin picked up the phone. He turned out that he was still awake, sitting up in the chair, studying. It didn't wake him up at all. So the idea of studying Torah also requires this next element. Now, it's a particularly difficult challenge because Judaism is not about missionaries and missionizing. We're not out to missionize. But there's a part of me that says that I wish that Judaism could learn the fine art of outreach. Right? And not for the sake of making them converts to Judaism, but for sure to give them the information so that the average person could know that there is one God and only one God. The spreading of Torah is an essential element to receiving Torah. Why is that? Fresh water cannot remain fresh in a stagnant pond. It cannot remain fresh. Your Torah that you receive is going to become stagnant if it's not shared and experienced out through others around us. As a matter of fact, the study of Torah really is not study if it hasn't been expressed in holiness and if it's not been expressed in sharing and caring for others. Now, I don't know what that challenge is and how it's going to be met. Honestly, I don't know. I received a call today from someone who's trying to network me and Rabbi Friedman's son, Zev or Zalman, something like that, about an idea to help developing outreach concepts for Jewish communities, to sort of teach them how to be a light to their community. And it's one they call it the Zechariah Project. So basically, Zechariah was says to take the tzitzit of a Jew and tug him. So the whole idea is to help train local rabbis who really have not really been trained more than just dealing with their own community, how to take their community, encourage them to inspire the non-Jewish world around them. I had a call, as a matter of fact, it was Rabbi Weissman who told me he had an idea after, I think it was Monday I talked to him. He says, hey, I got an idea, what do you think of this? He says he lives in a pretty ethnically lower class neighborhood. And he says, he's run into one or two people that were interested in studying Torah. But he says, I really would like to be able to do something in that community that would give them Torah wisdom to help them in their daily life, like help them know how to make good business decisions, how to have ethics. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That is being a light to the nations. It's taking your Jewish wisdom and bring it to an inner city community and say, look, we're going to hold a 6-week course on how to prosper in business. Can you imagine how effective that'd be? Yes.
There's a beautiful book for that. It's called Thou Shalt Prosper.
Thou Shalt Prosper. That's written by.
I'll think of it in a minute.
I know who it is, but I can't think of his name.
I'll think of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. But yes, it's a very good book. So the whole idea is there are vehicles out there, what it's going to look like the closer we get to redemption. I think that we're going to see the most fantastic things begin to unfold. I really wish that Jewish communities that are dying on the vine, and literally there are Jewish communities that are in rural areas that don't have enough to pay the bills. If they only realize that if they would reach out to the non-Jewish world, how much it would inspire their Yiddishkeit if they would begin to share Jewish wisdom to the non-Jewish world. Not for the purpose of converting them, but for the fact of showing them the wisdom that could help them prosper. And not only that, but to help them bring about redemption. By helping them to understand, if you want Mashiach to come, then how do you do it? By living as Mashiach is here, treating your friends and your neighbors with loving kindness, giving to charity, guarding yourself, being a just person. All those things are traits that can be shared with everybody, and it's not done because Judaism, by and large, is still a little bit apprehensive because they're concerned how their Judaism is going to be affected. I think it would be a positive one, but who am I to say anything about it? Rabbi Amital says this, that a bright countenance is a must for all Torah students. Think about it for a second. If you walk around with the mully grabs, all griping, constantly thinking that everybody ought to do something, and you have opinions of what everything that they should do, that does not bring a good light on Torah. He says this, Torah should be happy. One who studies Torah should be happy and smiling and not go around dark and gloomy. Thus he said of Rabbi Moshe Tzvi, the head of Harosh Yeshivah, when I first came to the land of Israel, I found bright countenance of those studying Torah. Missing the feeling of Torah is the feeling of Torah being beautiful. It's like their glow made you feel like Torah must be amazing to study. And he says with all due respect in the yeshiva, students whom I met, their faces generally seemed clouded over. But when I met Rabbi Nira, I discovered a world of beauty and a world of bright countenance. This was the new variety of Torah Jew, a person with openness, with good spirits, not a defensive stance, but beautiful language, wonderful measure stance, revealed before my eyes. I beheld the study of a Torah scholar and saw it on his face. You're going to see that with Rabbi Yehudah when he comes. Have you guys seen him before, met him before? When he comes, you're going to see him. He's full of joy and laughter, and he's just you'll just see it. You're gonna, when you get there, you go, oh, that's an example of what we should be. We should be people happy and smiling and joking. And I have there's one of the corner stores that I go to all the time to get my gas. And the other day I walked in, and the clerk behind the thing, she's back there, and I always will comment and ask, how are you doing, how are you feeling, et cetera, et cetera. And so I walked in, and the first thing, the place was packed. She goes, there's my favorite person. Oh. That made me feel so good, right? And I'm thinking, you don't realize what just a comment of like, how's your day, how's it going, thanks. Girl, you're looking good. You're all dressed up, are you going someplace? She goes, this is my work clothes. You know, she knows I'm being silly. But the point is, it makes somebody feel good to help their day. When we leave this place, every time we study Torah, if we don't do something to bring the light, the countenance of beauty and mercy and kindness to our face, we've missed an opportunity to share Torah with someone. So may God grant us the ability in these weeks to come, as we come close to Shavuos, that we really discover what it means to receive the Torah and the power of that Torah in our community and how it can transform not only us and our family, but our community. That concludes this shiur. Now we should